We all are only 1 degree removed from knowing someone who is being impacted by workplace violence or some form of online exploitation. This issue filters into employee wellness, impacting engagement at work. Let's bridge this gap by bringing awareness and education to these pressing issues and shield the vulnerable. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Shield the Vulnerable. I've got a really cool guest here today, Andres Sepulveda. Andres, welcome to the show today.
Hey Dave, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here and having a conversation with you today. So
Yeah,
let's get on it.
let's get at it. So you, Andreas, you're a senior HR leader in manufacturing and production, and you've got a lot of other really cool past experiences working in retail, home products, home services, and the corporate. And you work for quite a large organization now. Um, and for everybody that's listening today, I've had the opportunity to have several conversations with Andreas, who's got some really unique stories and real life actual experiences when it comes to active threats in the workplace. One actually involving firearms, one actually involving a fire drill or a fire alarm that happened. That one actually has a little bit of humor behind it to drive home the learning points, and we'll dive into that today. But Andres, what really struck me the most when I first met you is that you love to buy broken stuff and you love to try to repair it yourself. And you talked about doing that with like an old Nintendo or gaming system and everything like that. But it really made me start to think that we live in a society. We know it's becoming more and more volatile. We know that threats show up in so many different areas of our lives now, and workplace violence is increasing. You like to repair things. How
Yep.
would you, as an HR leader, begin to repair what we're seeing with regards to rising cases of violence in the workplace and beyond?
And and again, thank you for having me today. But the biggest thing that I've seen overall, my personal experience is where our society is driven by technology. We have smartphones, we have all this technology that kind of has removed some of our humanity, and that includes our empathy. So I was raised into believing that when you see somebody down on the ground, they're hitting rock bottom, is to help them. Put yourself in
Hmm.
their shoes. How could you help them and be able to do that? And a lot of in the workplace, for example, we're seeing a lot of just coworkers just walking by somebody that's having a bad day. They're just see them, or they see somebody yell at them or being bullied. They just kind of walk away. It's like it's not my problem. It's not affecting me. They just walk away. My approach is if you see something, say something. And in addition to that, not just only do that, do it with empathy. Because if you're just going to
Hmm.
approach it and be violent and bully the other person, that defeats the purpose. But it's always in a sense of being able to make sure that you are putting yourself in other shoes, in other people's shoes, and being able to approach it that way. Empathy is always going
How
to be first.
how do you do that though? You work for a company, I think there's like
Mhm.
18,000 people, and I know you don't oversee
Mhm.
all of them, and
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of other, you're not the only HR person working there. From an HR leadership perspective, though, how do you do that or how do you build that culture? Because you got 18,000 people working. You are a large organization. People are busy. They're just there to go about their business. They're doing all their things.
Mhm.
And sometimes we got to slow down and
Yeah.
recognize that somebody may be going through something. Like
Yeah.
you have to be intentional about empathy. I mean, it can be a
Yeah.
characteristic that we all have,
Sure.
but you have to be intentional about it. So how do
Mhm.
you slow down or how do you teach people to slow down and recognize those things?
So early in my career, like you said, we were all busy. We get a bunch of works. We wear in HR, we wear a lot of hats at a time, but we just have to go back to what basically our title says: human resources. We're there to
Hmm.
be a resource for humans. So we, like you said, we have to take a step back and say, hey, it not necessarily could come as, hey, this person is having a problem, or this or seeing an actual issue. It could be something that could trigger a red flag. For example, I had an example that where a person was just kind of sending emails, but their emails were not They didn't feel right to me. So you know what? I stopped and said, let's stop emails. Let's reach out to the phone. And and luckily, I was able to talk to them. And the problem with them, they were having a mental breakdown, basically, because of
Yeah.
their manager being no, not his technical manager, but overall, just being able to maintain the numbers that we're pushing. So when I had a conversation with them, a human to human conversation, and I put myself in their shoes and saying, "Hey, I understand where you're coming from. I've been there. I've been pressed. I've been pushed." They were able to kind of decompress and have a conversation with me on what actually the issues were. And then at that point, I could have a conversation with the manager and leadership and say, "Hey, we have this issue. There's too much pressure. How could we deviate from that point on and help the employees? Because if it's affecting one, most likely it's affecting others." So it's just
So,
taking an approach.
well,
No, go ahead.
in your opinion, where does that aspect of empathy first cross over with the prevention of workplace violence?
I think at that point is that's this, for example, this this example I provided. If I wouldn't said, "Oh," didn't felt that gut feeling in myself, "Hey, there's something wrong," this could have been
Hmm.
escalated to a worse situation, either the employee harming themselves, or taken to another step like actual violence at the workplace. So if we are not looking between the lines with empathy, we're not going to catch those. We're just going to go with our daily routine and be able to just continue. And then once the accident or something bad happens, it's when we're like, "Oh, I should have done something," which at that point is too late.
Yeah. Do you think so, based on that, do you think that we
Mhm,
live in this reactive society where so often we wait for that thing to happen? And I talk to people
mhm,
about this. I'm like,
mhm,
look at it like with,
mhm,
with our health. So many people wait to fix their health once they
mhm,
have a problem, right? So many people wait to fix financial situation once they have the problem. Like we're not
mhm.
proactive about these things. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No, I totally agree with that statement. We're more of a reactive society nowadays versus active society, being engaged, being having conversations. I've seen in workplace. I wouldn't say every workplace I've worked in was a reactive. There were situations in my previous employer where we're actually taking action prior to. And a good example is when we had one. I think 2 or 3 years ago, when we had a big hurricane season down in Florida, we had employees in that location. Instead
Hmm.
of waiting for, let's see if it hits or not hits, our company and I participate in it to set up networks where our employees could contact us and say, are you safe or not? So
Hmm.
we set up a web page that they could just go in and whenever they have access. We set up a phone number where they could be able to contact their manager and being able to do that. And not only that, because I was working in retail, we also provided our stores that we had out there as a safe haven for people that lost their homes or needed to go somewhere. So the stores were open to anyone in the public too, not just our only employees. And also we donated a lot of our products to help with the resources that were destroyed.
Okay. So I know for me, like with working with
Mhm,
organizations that we do, building a full circle culture of safety,
mhm,
I think is paramount to companies. I think workplace violence, I think prevention extends beyond the four walls of the workplace. It applies to remote workers. It applies to people in their home lives, whether they're going to concerts or shopping or vacationing or restaurants or school events with their kids or church, whatever it may be. That
mhm.
that culture of safety really contributes to employee engagement. So, from your experience then, with the example that you just gave in a previous workplace where you guys were proactive in this approach, how, in your opinion, did it work for employee engagement or didn't it? Were employees like, this is a lot, you're overreacting, it's too much, or were they appreciative of saying, it's amazing that you care so much about our safety?
I think we got a good positive outcome of it because
Hmm.
by the end of the whole disaster, we had 100% of our employees that actually reported to either the website, to the manager, and because we were trying to ensure that anyone that worked for us was safe. And first of
Right.
all, safety was first, and we ensured that everyone had a method of communication, regardless of phone, website, like I mentioned, and having the population that we had in Florida to be 100% that they reported, I think it was a
Hmm.
positive. They felt welcome, and I did see that the community was grateful for our services that we provided at the time, and also I believe that there was more local news that they were advertising how we helped. But overall,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of, hey, let's be proactive, and you're going to see that result, and you're going to see if people react to it. It's not, and unfortunately, Florida, we know that's always, we always have hurricane season. Sometimes it's going to
Hmm.
be less. Some the other situations are going to be worse. It's just a matter. We shouldn't be focusing. Oh, maybe it's not going to be a category one. Don't worry about what category is going to be. Set up precautions because you never know. The winds might change and it could turn into a worse category than you thought.
All right. That's honestly using that hurricane analogy is really, I mean, as somebody who lives in Florida and understands hurricane season and that preparedness that goes into it. You are right. All workplaces in Florida, I don't want to speak on behalf of all of them, but I'm sure most have hurricane emergency procedures plans put in
Mhm.
place, prior to going into shutdown, but as things pick up. And hurricanes, you can be sitting here this week and not know that in 6 days from now, you're going to be, facing a cat 2, cat 4,
Mhm.
hopefully not worse than that type of hurricane. And you need to be able to respond and act quickly. And so waiting to get notification for that hurricane is not the time to put the policy and procedure and the emergency action plans in place and the training for the staff. It's things that are
Correct.
already in place because organizations know, hey, we live in Florida. This is something that we could face.
Mhm.
Now, when it comes to acts of violence, and I'm talking more severe acts of
Mhm.
violence like active shooters, active threats that are higher scale, we, though, just tend to go, it's not going to happen to us. But yet
Mhm.
you can't flip through the news any given week and not see incidents where it's not happening at churches. Like it's happened to Walmart multiple occasions this year alone. Like this year, there was one at Walmart. A man with a knife went in and stabbed 11 people. It's lateral violence in the workplace, like employee on employee.
Mhm.
So that perception of it's not going to happen here just doesn't
Yeah.
work anymore, I don't think. But why do you think that we still wait and roll the dice and go, let's just wait and see if it happens before we do something?
I personally believe that it's just our society nowadays is that we have created this false narrative where we believe that our society is safe. We're saying,
Really?
hey, this is not going to happen to us. For example, one good example is that one of our stores, and I mentioned to you, is that we had an active shooter, and it wasn't an employee; it was from an employee's boyfriend that came with a
Right. So
gun. So
intimate partner
yeah,
violence
yeah.
related.
So so luckily we had our training, our asset perception team worked with me at the time. I was also helping with compliance training and being an instructional designer to be able to build those courses to push out to our population of employees. So we had a good active shooter training. So everyone went through it every year. They had to comply with the training, could go through it. There was a quiz and stuff. So thanks to that training is that the store, it was out in the, I think, boonies, I can't remember. It wasn't really a active store where you would see a lot of traffic, foot traffic.
Okay.
But they had the mentality, when I spoke to the manager, he had the mentality, I never thought this would happen in my store. He's like, if it wasn't to the training of active shooter that you had, I don't think my store would have been safe. So instead of him reacting to the situation, he already was prepared, calm, and knew based on the training how to address, how to move his people from the area that the active shooter was. So he was
But he was one that also pushed back on the training when you're
correct,
first talking about it, and he kind of had that
correct.
overreaction
Like
type of it's not going to happen
he's
here.
like, oh, it's not going to happen here. Why am I doing this training? There's never been an incident in this town of active shooter. Well, he regretted those
Yeah.
words afterwards. So, and the situation was that, unfortunately, there was some disputes between our employee and the boyfriend, where it led to the boyfriend coming to the. It was a bad breakup and led to the boyfriend come to the store. Luckily, the employee had already told us that he was violent. He might come to the store, and we even offer some services through our employee AAP
Hmm.
programs that to just kind of, hey, you want a week off, we would pay you to kind of those things to make the employee safe. And he said, no, I should be fine. I don't think he's going to come. Well, a couple of days later, security was informed and provided a picture of him. He was at the parking lot. He went into the store with a hand and his gun, shouting and yelling for the girlfriend. Luckily, the employee was not working that day. So the
Hmm.
manager was able quickly to communicate with security. Security communicated with local police enforcement, and by the time that the employee, not employee, but the actual person with the gun was even halfway into the store was fully evacuated by employees and customers,
Hmm.
and the police had already arrived at the scene and had surrounded the two entrances that we had.
So, and I mean, and thank God, like for quick reaction and that your employee wasn't there that day.
Mhm,
This recently happened, and I won't for it's not confidential. It's in the news. It happened to
mhm,
a in a state to an athletic club, health club chain there.
mhm,
Same thing, intimate partner violence related. Guy walks in, but before trying to find their partner, and I don't want to get this wrong, but I think, it was the two front desk receptionists that were working were shot,
mhm,
and then his gun jammed and he tried to make an exit for the building. And so, like, organizations need to think about this beyond, plans in place for just, okay, somebody comes to you in HR and says, look, going through a breakup at home or with my spouse or my significant other, and I'm concerned for my safety. They're off work. But that doesn't preclude that the rest of the workplace is always going to be safe from this. Because
mhm.
if they come in looking for that person with the intent to harm that person, they will harm everybody else in their way that could stop them from getting to them.
Yeah.
And that's where the
Eh,
procedures are so important to have in place in the training and the response systems.
yeah, yeah, and one of the things too is like going back to your question is that our society, um, when we're at home, when we're at workplace, we feel a little bit safe because that's where we go every day. That's where we
Sure.
live, breathe. And I think that's where it also triggers us to say, oh, it's not going to happen here because I feel safe. It gives a sense of safety inside. But
Hmm.
training is crucial because then that safety bubble kind of pops and says, well, this could happen. I should be prepared. Not only, like you said, not only in the workplace, but also outside of the workplace, because I could be a restaurant and somebody could, like in this situation, customers in our store, they were not prepared for this. They're not prepared
Hmm.
for somebody coming, walking in the store and with a gun and threatening to kill someone. So this
That's
is the
right.
situation where we have to, as employees or leadership, is to install this confidence in our employees to say, hey, we're giving you this training for work. However, it could expand beyond work, and your safety is the most important thing as an employer to us. So it's kind of making sure that we, as employers, leaders, we drill that into our employees, saying, hey, this is not just only at work. This could happen at your church. It could happen at the store. It could happen
Hmm.
when you're cutting your grass. Somebody could drive and confuse you or threaten you or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
As long as you know, and as long as you know how to react to the situation and not um, panic in a sense where you're just
Yeah.
going to react versus a control reaction. So I think
Yeah.
that's a training that allows that. And one example, and I think I mentioned, was that we were working to our remote employees because a lot of companies have gone to remote 100%, 90%, whatever the case may be, is that
Yeah.
we were not training them how to react if there was a home invasion
Right.
and stuff like that that could happen at the workplace. Or, hey, I was opening a ladder that I received from work or opening mail with a cutter and I cut myself. How
Right.
do I, how should I treat that injury versus that? So, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of stuff that we don't think that we do daily. It's just natural to us.
Uh, we fall into um, what's the word? We get we just get comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And we think, it's not going to happen. But it's interesting when you're talking about that response because when something does happen, and it's human biology, it's human nature that our senses actually deny it and think we're overreacting or what I'm perceiving isn't actually happening. And it does. But the training, this is why it's important. I'm gonna ask you to tell your story about the fire incident,
Yeah,
because I think that that's a really good case study for control over chaos.
yeah. So yeah, that is an interesting story, and it was early in my career with my previous employer. I was working in a dispatch call center setup where we would support a lot of our repair technicians out throughout the country. So there was situations where, of course, any other building would do fire drills.
Hmm.
So in one instance, there was smoke coming from the kitchen. The fire alarm went off, and we knew this particular person from the old building. It was just one person that every time that the fire alarm went, he was the first one out the door. He would
Hmm.
just leave it. He didn't care if he left his phone, anything personal. He just thought about himself. So of course, our building kind of came to a cost and like, oh, he's just overreacting and doing that. So it actually happened where he saw the smoke and he said, "There's a fire." Well, technically, it wasn't a fire. It was just, unfortunately, somebody left a coffee maker too long, and it just was brewing, not brewing, but burning up the coffee grains.
Hmm.
So apparently, he panicked. The fire alarms went on and created a kind of a little panic. But at the same time, we're like, oh, he's just overreacting. What happened is once people started seeing that smoke, they're like, oh, it is on fire, and started panicking. So
Hmm.
everyone, instead of following a comm line out the exit doors, emergency doors, they were just running, pushing each other. So it only takes one person to have that reaction in a mass. So this
Yes.
person, we knew that person was overreacting over the years, but in the situation, a combination here of him doing running out the door and saying there's a fire and people seeing the smoke just automatically say, oh my God, let's run.
Right. Well, that calm over chaos is so important. And all it takes is one person, though, especially the
Yeah.
first person to experience something or they aren't prepared and now they elevate it because that energy is going to elevate everybody else.
Mhm.
A really interesting story, similar, to yours with relation to a fire. This has probably happened 20 years ago. It was a concert out in, I want to say Rhode Island or some very East Coast state, anyways. And I think it was a great white concert. And they had pyrotechnics on stage. It was in a smaller type of club setting, few hundred people. And all of a sudden, the stage caught on fire. But people's initial response was deny it. This must be part of the show. There's not an actual fire. Well, that fire went out of control so fast. But now, rather than acting with calm, everybody started to panic. Everybody started running, pushing, trying to get out and
Mhm.
escape. And over 100 people lost their lives in the fire in this club because, and it's not to say that they weren't ready. I mean, who's ever really ready to
Yeah.
be in a building and all of a sudden a fire breaks out? But it's so critical that we have mental preparation in every aspect of our lives. And to me, it's not about like having people live in a state of fear or live in a state of panic. That's not it at all. It's about teaching people to live in that state of preparedness and ready because when something happens, okay, I've thought about this, I've experienced it mentally before. There's a lot of power in that mental preparation. People draw on it. Our minds actually don't know. If I were to close my mind right now and walk through an active shooter incident or an active fire or something, and what I'm going to do, my mind does not and cannot perceive like from being real or imagination. And
Mhm.
so I've trained myself now on how to respond, what to do, and what the whole response is going to look like. And so if something actually happens, I've mentally been there before. My response is going to be so much stronger than somebody who has not mentally prepared for this. And that's what allows us to override that freeze response that our body has, which is purely a biological thing that happens to us when our heart rate gets elevated. Our body's like, once it gets so high, we lose up fine motor control, but we can control that through preparation.
Mhm.
And I think that, when we look at that, that's what creates that calm over chaos. That's a critical aspect that organizations need to prepare, and why training drills are so important. A lot of places have policies, and that's great. Hey, you're solid on paper, but unless you're regularly, and I'm not talking day long or half day long or even hours long training drill scenarios, but quarterly, running a 15-minute drill, that costs
Yeah.
nothing, and it's what could really truly save lives. This, and you're talking like
Mhm.
um high risk, low incident, like, or low frequency. Probably not going to happen, but if it does, you're just going to be so happy that your organization was prepared for it.
Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned that I want to touch base on is, like, you mentioned that you're at a point where your brain doesn't distinguish if it's real or not real, but you're
Hmm.
preparing for it. Well, I just read an article, interesting article, where the brain cannot distinguish if we start visualizing and start believing the situation. So I think a lot of our training that we have out there is more reacting to the situation versus actually engaging with a learner saying, hey, visualize the situation.
Hmm.
Think of it as it's actually happening. So when it does happen, you are calm, prepared, and with the training we provide you, you are able to, I would say, not be a hero, but be a leader, because you're going to be ready for that situation. Because of course,
100%.
a lot of people think, "Oh, I want to be the hero," and I wouldn't say most of the time, but unfortunately, being the hero sometimes get you to 6 feet down the grade, down the ground. So
It,
unfortunately, that's why I say be a leader and be calm and think the way that you would in any other situation, because you don't want
yeah.
to go into a situation that would put yourself at risk.
Well, I mean, if you're on a flight and you're sitting in the emergency exit row, the flight
Mhm.
attendant's going to come up to you and say, Andreas, are you prepared and ready? Are you capable? Are you willing and able to do this in the event of an emergency, in the unlikely event of an emergency? And those are the people that organizations need to look into. And, it's sometimes it goes above the pay grade, or it's, somebody's like, I don't get
Yeah,
paid for this. But
yeah,
in the time when we need you, are you willing and able to step up? Are you able to help
mhm,
keep control and keep calm inside our four walls to help people and create a safe and create a safe plan? But I can't stress enough, organizations to have, to recognize threats, to understand threat assessments, and don't do it from a smoke and mirrors perspective. You have to stand
yeah,
by what it is that you mean, mean what you say, say what you mean what you say, and do it and follow through on it. Recently, and the incident happened in 2023, but there was a recent ruling that just came out. It was a teacher. She was shot by her 6-year-old student. Leading up to this, I recently had just read the grand jury report on it. And leading up to the incident, there was so many threat indicators that something could happen. Even like I'm talking like months, weeks leading up to it. Even the day of this teacher being shot, several students reported seeing the 6-year-old with a handgun, and it was dismissed. That teacher was awarded $10 million dollars because the school and the principals failed to protect her and act on the information that they had and to put in the parameters to create a safe workplace. We can never underestimate having that thought of it's never going to happen here,
mhm.
or I don't want to overreact to this, or somebody coming in, and this is tying everything back to that point of empathy that we led off with here,
Yeah,
that when we ignore things or just turn a blind eye to it, you never know what can happen, and we'll never be sorry that we went the extra mile or did the things that we should, but you will be sorry or regretful
mhm.
if you aren't prepared.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I always live by. Don't want to live with the regret, knowing if I could have done something different, even if it's something as
100%.
simple. I might be reading too much into the lines, but if I have that communication directly with the person, at least I know I did as much as possible, provide them information, and be able to prepare them for what they're going through.
Always.
And in this case here that you provide, it's sad, but it goes with everything. You could see this in bullying. We see people getting bullied, and I would say 90% of people are just going to see it and walk away instead
Yeah.
of Um, Approaching it and saying, hey, there's something wrong here. Going back to repair and video games is like, okay, there's something wrong. How could I solve it? How could
Yeah.
I approach a situation? How could I put my circuits into helping this person? Because I know that eventually that person either is going to harm themselves or they're going to get to a point where they break and harm others. And
Right.
just a little empathy, and it doesn't take much empathy. Start with little acts of little acts and at work, for example. Say you see somebody down or having a hard day, say, hey, how you doing? Do you want to have lunch? Or hey, I got this drink. Do you want it? I don't, or you want a coffee? Do you want to go downstairs and get a coffee with me? That could change their whole perspective for the day. And
Yep.
then they could feel valued, not just only feel safer, but also valued, and then change their perspective on how that day goes or the month goes for them.
Yeah. And it seems so simple, yet sometimes we ignore small acts of kindness,
Mhm.
but those things can really truly go a long way. Andres, getting to know you and having several conversations that we've had, um, I've learned that you truly do lead with empathy. That you put that human back into human resources. It's evident just in conversation with you. And kudos to you for, being in human resources and leading people from that perspective. So thank you for the work that you do. It takes a village, especially in a larger organization. Um, but for anybody listening, it's those small acts that we just sometimes can't turn a blind eye to, that we can't ignore, that can really truly make all of the difference in the world. And this is beyond response procedures or training. Lead with empathy and just sometimes just be a human.
Yep, that's
Andres,
all it takes.
that's all it takes. Andres, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your insights and real life insights. I mean, you've been
Mm,
involved from active shooters to fires within your workplace.
yep.
I hope there are no more in your future, but I know that you're prepared.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great having conversation here today. And again, everyone, go ahead and have a conversation with Dave. He has a lot of knowledge on this, and I do appreciate the conversation we had, Dave, and kind of gave you more insight on how to approach situations like this and training too.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you, Andres. Everybody, this has been another episode of Shield the Vulnerable. We'll see you on the next one.